Hello and welcome to the Career Compass, the podcast where I sit down and carry out fireside chats with senior executives to explore the moments, decisions, and philosophies that have shaped their careers. My aim here is simple: to create a space for open conversations where leaders can share their journeys, their learnings, and the wisdom they've gathered along the way. Today, I'm joined by a leader whose career I've admired for some time. Siew Ting Foo has spent over 2 decades shaping the growth of some of the world's most recognizable brands, from HP to Diageo, Mars, and Unilever. She's been consistently recognized as one of Asia's most purposeful and influential CMOs. But what sets her apart is not just the scale of her achievements, it's her philosophy, the belief that brands and leaders do their best work when they're built with soul. In this conversation, we'll talk about the defining moments in her career, what she's learned about transformation and agility from both Fortune 100 companies and leaner environments, and why cultural fluency and purpose-driven leadership are more important than ever in today's world. Siew Ting, it's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to the Career Compass.
Hi, Aaron. Hi. Thanks for having me on your show.
It's a real pleasure, and I feel honored because I know that last week you had an appearance on Bloomberg in Singapore, so this must be a slightly different experience. So thank you for taking the time.
I hope so. I hope this will be fun.
Sure, it will. If nothing else, it'll be lots of fun. So let's start by talking about your origin, some of your inflection points. So looking through your resume, you've led marketing at some of the world's most recognizable brands, as we said, HP, Diageo, Mars, and Unilever. So looking back, what were the defining moments that shaped your leadership style, and how did they prepare you for the career you have today?
That's a really good question. And I wouldn't say that there's one defining moment. There were actually multiple defining moments. I think two things shaped my career. One, the diversity of the different roles that I went into. In every of the shifts and the moves that I made, I was very intentional that it actually took a couple of principles and criteria. One, it definitely has to be a platform that allows me to learn more new things so that I grow. Second, it has to be a progression. And third, it has to make me feel a little bit uncomfortable. Um, because I firmly believe that, when you are uncomfortable, that's where you really test your own ability to grow and actually overcome adversity. So that's why, when I make all the shifts, I was very intentional that every of those shifts tick these three boxes. The second aspect of it that I felt was, great inflection points was maybe in the time that I was in Diageo. Um, in the very early stage of my career in Diageo, I had an amazing opportunity whereby I was one of the top 200 leaders around the world to be sent for a leadership course. And actually, during that leadership course, that was when I actually started finding my purpose. I was given a coach. Every one of us are given a coach, and it was a very long journey of through the experience with the coach that I found my own purpose, and obviously it went through my dark sides and really going back to
Yes.
even my childhood to really learn about my purpose. That moment was a core inflection point because it helped me find my purpose, but it also set the stage of how I actually lead going forward.
Mm. And you made a really interesting point there, which is essentially no pain, no gain. Unless you're pushing yourself into discomfort and trying to stretch the boundaries of what you're used to, it's not really possible to grow and to progress. So I think there were plenty of examples of that through your career. And as you mentioned, the impact of coaching to help you reach that a sense of purpose and where you really wanted to go and becoming aligned. So it sounds as though you'd credit that coaching with a great deal of clarity.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm. And of course, more recently, you wrote and published a book which was talking about building brands with soul. So, um, what does that phrase mean to you in practice? And how can leaders today create businesses that balance commercial growth with human impact? Could you unpack that for us?
Yeah, I that book was not only a marketing book, it was really more a summation of my 25 years or 2 decades of experience leading teams with purpose and also building brands with soul. My intent of writing the book was not to get fame for Siew Ting. It was purely because I wanted to pay back to the marketing community. And I really felt that before I became a CMO, I wish there was a book that actually teaches me, what to do to become a CMO. So I decided to write that book. The book encapsulates two things. One, my principles of how I build brands and business with soul. It also encapsulates my own definition of what makes great leaders with soul. It's not rocket science, but it was really formed through my own experience and also through the 2 decades I've worked with some amazing leaders. And from them, I learned what are the qualities, what are the traits that needs to be the kind of human-centric leadership that really is quite important in the world that we face now. And I actually kind of identified 5 criteria or 5 traits of what I define as leaders with soul. One of them is the first one that's most important is they need to have a great ambitious vision, and actually being able to inspire the troops and everyone towards that vision. Second, most leaders with soul, they often not use innovation and disruption to really create business models for the future. The third aspect of them is they are leaders who build leaders for the future, and they're not afraid to build leaders that become better than them. The third part is really practicing empathy and listening skills to really create leaders of the future. And also such great leaders with so they can straddle between strategy and execution really well. So those were just some of the principles that I admire in many of these leaders that I work with, and also I try to practice that as a leader myself.
And being able to distill 25 years of experience into those lessons, into that book, is hugely valuable for the next generation of aspiring CMOs coming through across the world. So it's highly recommended as a read. And I think the other interesting thing we talked about offline was how your perception evolved. So the experience you have, you're perhaps looking at something through a slightly different lens at this stage of your career than you were maybe 10, 20 years back. So to pass that on, and I also think it's a very important time to reflect, given what's happening with the explosion of AI capabilities, increased automation, going back to that sense of purpose and alignment you mentioned early in your career. If you were advising an aspiring marketeer, younger in their career, perhaps being faced with all of this disruption, what would be the advice you'd give to them in terms of remaining aligned and purposeful?
I think maybe defined in 3 C's. Curiosity to learn new things, curiosity to grow. That means having the growth mindset, and then curiosity to challenge yourself. So, so don't be afraid to take on roles that are that bigger than what you're ready with. Because I really think that the craft of marketing is fast evolving with technology. You have to stay really hungry, keep learning, keep asking why. Even I'm learning on a daily basis on AI.
Yeah, we should never stop learning. I think it's a lifelong experience, and
Yes.
the day we stop learning is the day we kind of stagnate and become less useful, I think.
Yes.
And a great quote came to mind, which was, "Wonder is the seed of all knowledge." So you start with that curiosity to learn, to improve, to be useful, to add value. It's a great starting point. So very good
Yeah,
advice.
and we need to be able to know at each juncture or each adventure that we go into, we are able to empty our cup and then learn new things to pour into the cup, right? So, the ability to empty your cup sometimes is a
Yes.
skill that not everybody does
Mm.
that.
Yeah, absolutely right. And if we think about the subject of transformation and agility, you've obviously yourself, Siew Ting, delivered transformation in both Fortune 100 giants, but also leaner environments, sometimes with billion-dollar budgets, other times with startup resources. So, in your opinion, how do you adapt your approach depending on the scale and speed of the challenge?
Think no magic, just very much basic, um, principles of, of business management, and by really starting with the customer, um, and really, looking at what the customer is really looking for, and then from there you you know, develop the plan according to the ambition and the resources itself. So it's really not really anything magical, but it's more about starting with the customers and then you adapt according to it. And the interesting thing with what we're facing now in AI is that it allows you to iterate your model, meaning gone are the days whereby you have to develop a campaign that takes 4 or 5 years, 4 or 5 months to develop. And then only after you launch 4 or 5 months, then you know the results, and you need to take 3 months to know the results. Now you can literally test and iterate the model, which is the beauty of it. And then it allows agility, allows adaptability, but then the mindset is the critical one, right? The mindset to not to be afraid to fail, and
Mm.
then it's almost treating it like an MVP, and then you tweak and you learn and tweak and learn, and then you create a flywheel. So I think that's kind of what AI helps and enable people versus some people look at AI and say, hey, it's going to take away my job. Actually,
Yeah.
is slightly not. I don't see it in that way.
No, I mean, I think it's all about trying to supercharge capabilities and augment your staff. If AI is applied to marketing and it can iterate very quickly repeatable processes that are maybe mundane or low value, administrative focus, sure, that's an obvious value add. I think the other point is a lot of the conversations I'm having right now with senior executives is the fact that if you're in a leaner environment and you have startup type resources on offer, AI is a great leveler. You can now compete with much larger organizations using the capabilities of the technology, and you can iterate faster, you can get quicker feedback and testing. So it really is quite a fascinating time, equally exciting and maybe a little bit scary at the same time, depending on your point of view. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
So let's talk about, sorry, yes, you think,
No, no, no.
oh, I can edit that bit out. That's cool. So let's talk now about cultural fluency. So having worked across Asia, ANZ, globally, you've become known for cultural fluency. Could you maybe share an example of where understanding local culture unlocked growth and maybe what advice you'd give to leaders working across diverse markets?
Well, given the fact that I'm an Asian and I have the last 2 decades worked in Asia, and Asia is just an amalgamation of very, very complex culture, um, complex languages, complex culture. You can't look at things one size fits all, right? China itself is already very, very complex with multiple languages. India is the same. Japan is the same. Korea is the same. So because of that, and having brought out in Asian culture, I learned the importance of humility. I learned the importance of listening skills. And hence, for me, building brands, especially brands and marketing, a big part of that, you're actually answering the human minds, right? So
Mm.
that cultural fluency becomes really important. I use what I call, and it's quite a famous thing that I use now in my vocabulary, and people know me for that. It's really, I use the term on global brand, local soul, which
Mm.
means that you can build global brands that is consistent, but you need to know when you flex that, and especially on the local soul part is where the cultural understanding and cultural fluency and cultural intelligence come into play. And a great example of how I did that is really as a HP Asia Pac CMO. I managed to still keep a very consistent global brand look and feel, but then I execute that and touches consumer heart very differently in different parts of Asia.
Mm.
So that cultural understanding and cultural fluency, I feel, is even more critical now in the world we live in, whereby there is just so much fragmentation going on, and individual macro environment there, whereby there
Yeah.
is more individual nationalism going on. So
Yeah.
marketers need to become cultural natives now.
I like that
And they
phrase,
need
to
to
become a
they
cultural
need to
native.
be yeah they need to be even more aware, given where the fragmentation that we are actually facing now. So in some sense, global marketers need to be more global, but yet at the same time they need to be more local on not being cultural insensitive. Yeah.
And you're reminding me of the very basic kind of slogan that HSBC are known for, the world's local bank or the local global bank, something similar. I forget the exact phrase, but the point was we are everywhere. We're kind of across the whole planet, but we understand your cultural fluency in your region. So it's probably more critical than ever, given all the geopolitical situation and nationalist tendencies in certain parts of the world. So yeah. So
Yes.
let's talk a little bit about maybe resilience now. Resilience and renewal. You have mentioned, of course, that transformation isn't just about markets; it's also about people. So if you think about your own journey, how have you navigated setbacks or moments of doubt? And as an extension, what practices have helped you stay resilient in those situations?
That's a fantastic question. And it's a journey, it's a process versus a destination. And I think, I talk about it quite a lot in my book, is that in order to build great global brands or be a great leader with soul, you need to start with self. You need to really know who you are, what drives you, what are your strengths, and you need to know what are your derailers. And you need to really work on yourself quite a fair bit before you could um, you could handle setbacks. You could build big teams, and you could build great brands and businesses. So I talk a lot about it, quite a lot, in my book. I'm someone which is very self-aware, and what helps me get through setbacks is purpose, my purpose, and also having the humility to have people around to tell you what you are not good at, or when you are
Mm,
when your derailer come in, and all of us have derailers, right? And when your stress comes in, so having the people around to tell you that, and having the right sounding board around you are kind of some of the measures that I take quite often. One of my areas of development is energy, in terms of energy management, because I'm a type A personality. I drive myself quite hard. And driving yourself quite hard on a very continuous basis is not good, because it might result in burnout, right? And that has always been an area that I know is a derailment, and I work quite hard on putting rituals in my life, like meditation,
mm.
thoughts. Though I'm still pretty bad at it.
Well, it's a continuous journey, isn't it? Managing your energy. Yeah. Excellent. That makes a lot of sense. And I think you're quite right. There's another kind of quote or directive that was, I think, stated by Jim Rohn, and it was always work harder on yourself than you do on your job. And I think there's a huge amount of truth in that. Understanding yourself, where your best align, what are your strengths, what are your hidden blind spots, and then of course try to translate those into where you can be truly effective and in your primary operating zone. I think there's a huge amount of value in that. One thing I like to ask my guests quite frequently towards a kind of closing session is really advice for the next generation. So if you were mentoring the next generation of marketing leaders, what's the one piece of advice you'd give about leading with purpose, building a career that has both impact and meaning?
Keep challenging yourself. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Why do I say that? Because my biggest growth comes from being uncomfortable. and it can be being uncomfortable in all kinds of situation. Whether is it on personal leadership, whether is it on professional, taking up a role that I'm really uncomfortable with, that I'm not good at, writing a book, which I've never done it before. So
Yeah.
it's about making yourself uncomfortable, because I really believe that those are the moments that you have the biggest growth, and actually you learn more about yourself, and
Mm.
you know where you can stretch your potential.
And I think there's also a very interesting point you mentioned about essentially around low ego. Have people around you that will challenge you, that will have a different opinion and stress test your ideas. It's all about being open-minded and receptive. That's a huge part of the value prop, I think.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Well, Siew Ting, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and I really appreciate you spending the time to come and talk to us. If anyone would like to potentially reach out for a conversation with Siew Ting to talk about all things marketing, maybe ask a few more questions about your book, with your permission, I will share the details of how to get in touch with you and learn more about you. Other than that, thank you again. I hope everyone who is watching really enjoyed the episode, and we wish you all the very best, Siew Ting, for the remainder of 2025.
Thank you.
Real pleasure. All the best.